Ever wish you could just like download knowledge directly into your brain? Bypass all the hours of study and just instantly become an expert.
I mean, who hasn't, right? It'd be pretty amazing, like a mental shortcut to mastery.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of the idea behind the deep dive. We take these really complex, fascinating subjects and we distill them down to this core, actionable insights.
Basically, we do the heavy lifting so you can get right to the good stuff.
Precisely. And today, we're diving deep into the world of advanced kickboxing. Specifically, we've been poring over excerpts from Advanced Kickboxing, a framework for success.
Ah, now that's a title that gets right to the point, doesn't it? No messing around.
None whatsoever. And the author, Pat O'Keefe, he's not messing around either. He's the head and British team coach for KICK, a commentator for Sky Sports, and get this, he's fought 3 world champions.
Wow, so this isn't just some armchair theorist. We're talking about a guy who's been in the trenches at the highest levels of the sport.
Exactly. And his book, it's packed with knowledge, advanced techniques, tactical approaches, fight planning, the mindset of a champion. It's all about creating a structure for success.
A framework, as the title so aptly puts it.
Absolutely. So, our mission today is to extract the most important nuggets from this treasure trove of knowledge. We want to give you, our listener, a real understanding of what it takes to progress in a combat sport at that elite level.
But here's the thing, even if you've never thrown a punch in your life, the principles we're going to unpack, they're applicable way beyond the ring. We're talking about skill development, strategic thinking under pressure, mental toughness, resilience. This stuff is relevant no matter what your field of interest is.
Couldn't agree more. All right, so let's jump right in. And I think a great place to start is with one of the more intriguing advanced techniques that O'Keefe covers, the bolo punch. Now, this isn't your standard jab or cross. It's a looping strike that generates power in a really unique way.
It's all about shortening the arc right before impact, almost like a whiplash effect.
Exactly. And what's fascinating about the bolo is its origin. O'Keefe says it was adopted by Hispanic boxers, and it's actually thought to be derived from the Filipino bolo.
The bolo. You mean that long knife?
The very same. Apparently, it was used very effectively by Filipino guerrillas during World War II. And because of this, it's not a technique that you typically find in traditional boxing manuals.
Interesting. So it's like this hidden gem that's been passed down through these less conventional fighting lineages.
Exactly. And O'Keefe breaks down the bolo into 3 main variations: horizontal, rising, and looping. Now, the horizontal bolo, at first glance, it might look a bit like a loose hook, but the power generation is totally different.
Right. It's not about that full body rotation that you see with a traditional hook.
Nope. It's much more about a concentrated whipping motion, primarily from the arm and shoulder. And because of this, it can be thrown from angles that a standard hook just can't reach.
So you're saying it's got this element of surprise built into it?
Huge element of surprise. It can come from outside your opponent's direct line of sight, and you can cut back in at almost any point along that circular path. It's really hard to defend against, especially if they're expecting those more linear punches.
Especially effective against fighters with a wire stance or a elusive guard, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. O'Keefe even specifically mentions it as a great tool for smaller fighters who are trying to get inside on a taller opponent.
Makes sense. You're slipping under their reach and then exploding up with that short, powerful whip.
Exactly. Then you've got the rising bolo. Now, this one, it kind of resembles a loose uppercut.
But again, not that classic upward drive from the legs and hips.
Nope. It's still all about that whipping action, but this time in an upward arc. And O'Keefe actually suggests it can be a very effective counter when your opponent's stepping in.
Interesting. So you're almost meeting their forward momentum with that rising strike.
Exactly. You're targeting areas like the chin, the ribs, maybe even the solar plexus or the heart. He even talks about the heart being a particularly dangerous target, something to always be mindful of course.
Of course. And he stresses practicing the rising bolo on focus pads, really focusing on achieving that loose whipping motion.
Yeah, he says tensing up actually kills the power. It's all about that fluid, relaxed motion.
Which makes sense, right? You're trying to generate that sudden acceleration, that whiplash effect.
Exactly. Then there's the looping bolo. This one is all about going over the top, like literally over your opponent's guard or even an incoming punch.
Almost like a sneaky overhand right, but with that unpredictable shortened arc.
Precisely. O'Keefe describes it as a stunning blow. A real ambush. Good timing and distance control are obviously crucial. He even recommends practicing it by having a partner throw jabs while you work on whipping the bolo over the top, even incorporating a body dip for evasion.
The body dip is interesting. It adds another layer of deception, changing your level right before the punch lands.
Yeah, it's like a little disappearing act, and then boom, the bolo appears out of nowhere.
It really plays into that element of surprise that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And the bolo, it's not just an offensive weapon. O'Keefe actually dedicates a whole section to using it as a counter to specific attacks.
Oh, I like that. So it's like having a specialized response for every move your opponent throws at you.
Exactly. For example, against a front kick, he suggests stepping to the side and then throwing a looping bolo to the temple. Against a right cross or a jab from a southpaw fighter, a left-handed fighter, he recommends slipping to the left and countering with a horizontal bolo to the chin. Against a left jab, it's a diagonal step forward with, again, a horizontal bolo.
So you're constantly moving, changing angles, and then bam, that unexpected bolo appears.
Precisely. And he even gets into using the bolo as a counter to hooks. Against a right hook, he advises ducking under and then coming up with that rising bolo to the liver, the solar plexus, or even the chin. And against a left hook at close range, he suggests bobbing and weaving to the outside and then firing a left rising bolo to the heart.
That's brilliant. You're using their own momentum against them.
Exactly. So to really sum up the essence of the bolo, O'Keefe emphasizes its adaptability. You can change the angle of attack, vary the degree of whip, and incorporate all sorts of evasive body movement.
Like a chameleon of a punch.
Yeah.
Constantly changing, always unpredictable.
Exactly. All right, moving on from the deceptive loops of the bolo, let's talk about something a little more aerial. Let's talk about jumping kicks.
Now we're getting into the realm of the truly spectacular.
No doubt about it. O'Keefe considers jumping kicks to be like the hallmark of an expert kicker.
The kind of technique a future champion needs to master.
Exactly. And the main advantage is pretty obvious. You're generating near maximum body weight behind the strike.
You're essentially turning yourself into a human projectile.
Precisely. O'Keefe actually uses the term jack-in-the-box to describe the effect, and he's right. It's that sudden, explosive movement that makes jumping kicks so effective.
But of course, there's a trade-off.
Always is.
Right. You're incredibly vulnerable when you land. Susceptible to sweeps, counters, all sorts of nasty stuff. And the larger movements can be pretty easy to telegraph if your timing and disguise aren't perfect.
He makes it very clear that you shouldn't even think about experimenting with jumping kicks in a real fight unless you've drilled them relentlessly in the gym.
It's all about repetition until they become second nature.
Absolutely. Focus pad work for accuracy, heavy bag training for power, sparring to get that timing and situational awareness dialed in. And he actually emphasizes practicing the timing with a partner at half speed just to get that launch and landing perfect.
Makes sense. You got to nail the fundamentals before you can unleash it at full power.
Exactly. So let's break down a couple of specific jumping kicks, starting with the jumping rear leg roundhouse kick. This one, he considers it to be a pretty versatile and relatively fast technique. And it's especially effective as a counter to any attack coming from your opponent's rear side.
Because they're naturally opening up their opposite side when they commit to a rear side technique.
Exactly. So he gives the example of countering a right cross. You pull your left side back to evade, and as you do that, you jump, twist your hips, and then unleash that roundhouse kick to the side of their head.
The power coming from that explosive hip rotation.
Precisely. He actually recommends practicing this on the heavy bag by timing your jump and kick as the bag swings back towards you, really focusing on driving your entire body weight through it.
And the classic drill, with a partner holding a shield while they throw a right cross. Invaluable for developing that timing and anticipation.
Absolutely. Now, he also talks about using the jumping rear leg roundhouse kick to counter a roundhouse kick aimed at your body.
Interesting, because when they throw that kick, they're momentarily exposing their own head.
Exactly. And if you anticipate it early enough, you can often beat them to the target with your jumping roundhouse.
He even talks about potentially landing a knockout with this counter if you catch them clean.
He does. Now, moving beyond just countering, he does touch on using jumping kicks offensively. But he stresses that you either need impeccable timing or you need to integrate it into a combination to disguise its approach.
So it's not about just launching yourself into the air and hoping for the best.
Definitely not. One combo he suggests is a jab, a cross, followed by a rear leg sweep, and then that jumping roundhouse to the face.
I like that. You're using those initial strikes to disrupt their balance, and then bam, you follow up with that explosive finisher.
Exactly. That sweep is key. It takes their lead foot out of the equation, momentarily pinning their weight distribution, and it leaves them wide open for that high kick.
It's all about setting the stage.
All right, next up, we've got the jumping, spinning heel kick. Now this one, O'Keefe says it can generate truly immense power, like potentially enough to break through a guard, but it's also one of the hardest to land cleanly.
Lots of moving parts, very precise timing required.
For sure. But when it does connect, he says it can produce some of the most spectacular knockouts you'll ever see.
Hmm.
So the technique itself, it involves jumping straight up, twisting your body at the peak of the jump, bringing your knee high, and then extending your leg in a sweeping arc to connect with your heel.
You're basically turning yourself into a spinning top of pain.
Pretty much. And he emphasizes the importance of rotating your head, your shoulders, and especially your hips throughout the entire movement.
You're trying to generate that rotational force, that torque.
Precisely. And the optimal time to throw it, as a counter to any straight punch or kick coming from your opponent's lead side.
Makes sense. You're using their forward momentum against them.
Exactly. So he gives the classic example of countering a jab. You jump, spin into that kick, and the heel connects with the side of their head. And he even points out that a lot of fighters, even experienced ones, have a tendency to scissor their jabs.
Scissor. Meaning?
Meaning their rear guarding hand drifts back a little, creating that perfect opening for the spinning heel kick.
Ah, I see. So it's like a subtle flaw in their technique that you can exploit.
Exactly. And of course, he stresses the importance of drilling this with a partner holding a shield, getting that reaction and timing dialed in, and heavy bag work is essential for developing that knockout power.
And focus pad drills for accuracy, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Now, he also mentions using the spinning heel kick as a counter to a lead leg front kick.
Really? How does that work?
He suggests using a lower parry to deflect the incoming kick and then immediately transitioning into that jump and spin.
Yeah.
Parry helps to disrupt their balance, turn their body, and expose their targets to the arc of your kick.
That's clever. You're essentially setting them up for that spinning attack.
Exactly. Now, as for using the spinning heel kick offensively, he suggests incorporating it into combinations that force your opponent to shift their weight onto their back foot.
Because that loads them up for that spinning attack.
Precisely. A classic example is the jab cross left hook combo, ending with that spinning heel kick to the head. You're using those punches to break down their guard, disrupt their balance, and then bam, you finish with the spinning kick.
Beautiful. So key takeaways with jumping kicks, timing is everything.
Yeah.
And they're best used either as direct counters or as the final blow in a well-constructed combination.
Couldn't agree more. All right, let's move on from those dynamic aerial attacks to something a bit more grounded. Let's talk about sweeping.
Ah, the art of taking the legs out from under your opponent.
Exactly. And O'Keefe, he defines sweeping as the act of knocking your opponent's feet out from under them.
Which, of course, is easier said than done.
Absolutely. He actually notes that this builds on some more basic techniques that he covered in a previous book.
So we're getting into the more advanced, nuanced stuff here.
Precisely. And he emphasizes that these advanced sweeps require a real sensitivity to your opponent's balance. Lots of practice with a partner is essential.
Because if you mistime a sweep, you can end up in a really bad position.
For sure. But when mastered and applied intelligently, sweeps can be incredibly effective. They can disrupt your opponent's confidence, make it hard for them to plan effectively, and create openings for follow-up attacks.
It's all about taking away their foundation, their stability.
And timing, as always, is crucial. The ideal moment to sweep is right as their foot makes contact with the ground.
So you need to be able to anticipate their movements and react instantaneously.
Exactly. And he then goes on to detail a bunch of specific sweeping techniques and combinations. A classic one is the sweep-eye roundhouse combo used as a counter. So your opponent throws a lead leg front kick, you move back, sweep their leg as it lands, and immediately follow up with a high roundhouse to the face.
Beautiful. You're taking their leg out and then capitalizing on that moment of instability.
Exactly. He even talks about this combination resulting in some really spectacular knockouts. Then you've got the offensive variation. Jab, cross, sweep, high roundhouse to the head.
In that case, those punches are just setting up the sweep and the head kick.
Precisely. Then there's the lead leg front kick sweep combo used as a counter, which he suggests for dealing with aggressive punchers.
Because they're constantly trying to close the distance.
Exactly. So as they launch a right cross, you throw a quick front kick, like a stop hit, to disrupt their attack, and then you close in and sweep the back leg.
Interesting. So it's a combination of disruption and then taking advantage of that momentary opening.
Precisely. Then there's the spinning heel kick spinning sweep combo, which is a little more advanced. It involves countering a rear leg kick with a spinning heel kick, and if they duck under it, bam, you hit them with the spinning sweep.
That's slick. Requires a lot of finesse, though.
Definitely. Then there's some techniques borrowed from judo, like the transmitting foot sweep. Yeah, it's all about using your opponent's own momentum against them. So as they're retreating, you sweep their lead foot into their back foot, basically adding to their backward movement and making them fall over.
Oh, that's clever.
And then there's the swallow's turn sweep, which is a counter sweep.
Counter sweep.
Yeah, so they try to sweep you, and you pull your foot back but keep your knee bent, and then you sweep their attacking foot.
Interesting. So it's like a reverse Uno card in a fight.
And lastly, there's the roundhouse into sweep, where you throw a high roundhouse, and then instead of retracting, you drive it down into a sweep of their lead leg.
I like that. It's unexpected.
Exactly. So to sum up, sweeps are incredibly useful for disrupting your opponent, taking away their balance, creating openings, and just generally throwing them off their game.
Timing is key, and power is definitely important too.
Absolutely. O'Keefe actually recommends practicing against a light bag placed on the floor to develop that downward sweeping power.
Makes sense. You're training that specific movement.
All right, we've talked about individual techniques, combinations, and those disruptive sweeps. Now let's get to the part that everyone loves to see. Knockout combinations.
Ah, the art of ending a fight decisively.
Exactly. And O'Keefe, he makes a really interesting point. He says achieving a knockout is actually the most efficient and safest way to win a fight.
Because you're minimizing the amount of time you're exposed to potential damage.
Precisely. And he breaks down the key factors that contribute to landing a knockout. The force and accuracy of your strikes, obviously.
Can't argue with that.
Your opponent's durability, because some people can just take a punch better than others.
That's for sure.
The specific techniques you choose for the combination.
Right. Some techniques are just inherently more powerful or better suited for targeting certain areas.
Exactly. And then, crucially, the timing of the delivery. Exploiting openings, using feints, all that stuff.
Timing is everything.
And he actually lists out the 5 primary knockout targets. The jaw, which you can hit with a horizontal or a 45-degree angle blow. The point of the chin, which is vulnerable from pretty much any angle.
Yeah, that's a classic target.
The temple, which is that slightly recessed area on the side of the head. The liver, located below the right floating ribs. And the solar plexus, which is right below the sternum.
Right. So you've got the head targets and then you've got the body targets.
Exactly. And he talks about how a well-placed headshot can create that concussive brain shake.
Right. You're basically disrupting the brain's normal function.
And he gets into how body shots can be incredibly debilitating as well.
Oh, yeah. A good shot to the liver can shut you down completely.
No doubt about it. And O'Keefe really stresses that it's those combinations, those rapid-fire sequences that target multiple areas that really increase your chances of getting that knockout.
It's about overwhelming their defenses.
Exactly. So let's get into some specific combinations, starting with close range. There's a great saying in boxing, kill the body and the head will die.
Love that. So simple, but so true.
And one combo he recommends for close range is called the 3-punch kill. It's a shovel hook to liver, a left hook to the jaw or temple, followed by a cross to the opposite jaw.
Nice. You're targeting both sides of the head and the body all in one quick burst.
Exactly. And this one is designed to exploit the tendency for fighters to drop their rear elbow when they're defending against body shots. Then, for opponents who have a very tight guard, he suggests a combination called prizing open the guard. It's an upward uppercut to the chin, followed by a hook to the jaw, and then a spinning back fist to the temple.
I like that. It's like you're forcing their guard open with that initial uppercut.
Exactly. And you can actually make it even more effective by preceding it with a feinted hook.
To draw their guard out just a little bit.
Exactly. Now, moving out to medium range, we have a combo called the man-stopper. This one is a snapping front kick to the liver, followed by a straight cross to the point of the chin, and then a lead hook to the jaw.
I see what you're doing there. You're exploiting the natural reaction to raise the guard after that initial kick.
Exactly. It leaves that lower jaw wide open. And another option for medium range is go with the flow, which is a hook to the jaw, a spinning back fist to the temple, and then a back thrust kick to the solar plexus.
Nice. You're using that circular power from the spinning back fist.
Exactly. And this one is particularly effective if your opponent has a tendency to drop their rear hand. All right, lastly, we've got long-range knockouts, which are obviously the hardest to pull off.
They often require a bit of luck, right?
A bit of luck and a lot of precision. So one combo he suggests is strongest blow, weakest target. It's a spinning back thrust kick to the liver, followed by a sharp cross to the point of the chin.
Interesting. You're going from maximum power to their most vulnerable area
Exactly. And this one can be especially effective if your opponent throws a cross of their own or if their guard widens even for a moment.
because they're momentarily exposed.
And then there's win with a spin. This one is a spinning hook kick to the jaw or temple, followed by a spinning front kick to the liver.
Definitely for the advanced kicker.
He does say that, yeah. It's not for everyone. But the takeaway here is that while anyone can get lucky and land a knockout punch, the truly skilled fighter, they can create those opportunities through superior timing, accuracy, and a deep understanding of their opponent's weaknesses.
It's about turning chance into near certainty.
All right, we've covered a ton of ground here, from individual techniques to those knockout combinations, but there's one more essential skill we need to talk about: close range fighting,
Ah, the clinch.
the phone booth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And O'Keefe, he actually describes it as a mini fighting system with its own unique set of principles.
Because the dynamics change completely when you're in that close range.
Absolutely. He actually calls it the most dangerous range of all, which might surprise some people.
Why is that? Well, for one thing, you're both within immediate knockout range. One well-placed punch or elbow can end the fight. So the first rule he emphasizes is protecting yourself.
Makes sense. Your defense is paramount in that situation.
Absolutely. He also talks about the importance of maintaining your own balance while actively trying to disrupt your opponents.
Because if you can off-balance them, you create openings for your own attacks.
Exactly. And he stresses that power at this range comes from rapid body shifting and those short, sharp movements.
Not those big looping punches we were talking about earlier.
Nope. It's all about quickness and efficiency. And he introduces this really interesting concept called mirroring.
Mirroring.
Yeah, it's basically the idea of synchronizing your movements and techniques with your opponents so that as they attack, you're already in position to exploit those openings that their movements create.
Interesting. It's like you're anticipating their attacks by understanding the vulnerabilities inherent in their own techniques.
Precisely. So he then gets into specific stances and guards that are effective at close range. And interestingly, he actually advises against relying too heavily on the full guard.
Really? Why is that?
He says it can actually leave you too open in that tight space. It's better to focus on things like the half guard and the cross guard. The half guard is really good at shutting down a lot of your opponent's targets, and it allows you to throw those tight hooks and short crosses. And the cross guard is great for preventing clean scoring shots and applying forward pressure.
So it's about being compact, protecting your center line, and using those short, powerful strikes.
Exactly. And he stresses the importance of experimenting with these different guards and being able to adapt to your opponent's reactions.
Because if they see you doing the same thing over and over again, they'll figure out a way to counter it.
Exactly. He even mentions a surprising technique that can be very effective at close range: a tight, sudden, spinning back thrust kick to the liver.
Wow, that's unexpected.
It is, and he strongly recommends structured sparring sessions focused specifically on close range fighting, maybe starting in a corner or against the ropes, just to get used to fighting in that confined space.
Makes sense. You need to train specifically for that type of environment.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to maintaining your own balance and disrupting your opponents, he says a strong opponent will often try to push you backward.
Right, they're trying to use their strength to overpower you.
Exactly. And simply resisting that force can be tiring and ultimately ineffective. Instead, he recommends learning specific balance shifting maneuvers. One is called yielding to pressure, which is basically pivoting away from the direction of the push and countering with a hook. Another is breaking his balance, where you pivot and use your shoulder to push against their stance at a right angle, disrupting their stability.
So you're using their own force against them.
Exactly. Then there's stealing the punch, where you subtly withdraw your lead shoulder as if you're pulling back, but then you fire a short cross during that brief moment of pushing. And then there's even a seemingly passive tactic called the lay-on, which is just leaning your weight on your opponent.
Just to tire them out.
Exactly. It can limit their mobility and sap their energy.
I see. It's all about those little things that can give you an edge.
Absolutely. Now, generating power at close range, he says it comes from that rapid pivoting of your feet, hips, and shoulders.
Like a coiled spring suddenly releasing.
Exactly. And he recommends training on the heavy bag while leaning against it to simulate that confined, pressured environment, and he emphasizes that reflex speed is crucial at this range.
Because everything happens so fast.
Exactly. You need to be able to react instantly. And finally, he elaborates on that concept of mirroring that we talked about earlier.
Right, using the mirror to see what openings you create when you throw techniques.
Exactly, because those same openings are going to be present in your opponent's defense.
So it's about understanding how your own attacks create vulnerabilities that you can then exploit when your opponent attacks.
Precisely. So the big takeaway here is that close-range fighting is its own unique beast.
You either master it or you become its victim.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So I think we've covered a ton of ground here today.
We have. And you know what's really fascinating to me is that this deep dive into kickboxing, it's about so much more than just fighting.
I completely agree.
It's about strategy, understanding leverage, exploiting weaknesses, maximizing your strengths.
And these principles, they apply way beyond the ring. Whether you're trying to excel in business, in your personal life, whatever it is, those core principles of meticulous training, strategic thinking, and adaptability, they're universally valuable.
Absolutely. So here's a question for you, our listener. We've talked about the intense dedication required to master these techniques, the tactical planning, the physical conditioning, the mental toughness. Which of those elements do you believe is the most crucial for achieving true mastery in your own field of interest?
That's a great question. Something to really ponder. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Feel free to reach out and share any insights or questions that have come up for you during this deep dive.
And thanks for joining us. We'll see you on our next exploration.
Until next time.